Beep, 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 beep. Beep,
Huh.
beep, beep, beep.
This has a very Genesis feel to it. My melody
Yeah.
from that part, it reminds me of the yellow.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Now, live from Chicago, the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
Hal Sparks, actor, comedian, and multimedia personality.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hal Sparks.
All right, let's do this.
Welcome to the show, everybody. It's Hal Sparks Mega Worldwide, the radio edition every Saturday with dear friend Johnny Million. And hi, and we were doing a little bit of chit-chatting about guitar stuff before this show came in, and then I dropped something your direction. Look out! That a couple of news stories that you weren't aware of, and you were throwing some my way. I had been tracking a little bit, but wasn't quite aware of the latest drop on it. You brought up Ben Stiller and how he factors into the Iran war.
He was not pleased with the Department of War's use of clips from Tropic Thunder to glorify the Iran war. He was like, you can stop using those anytime now. And by the way, war is not a movie.
Right. It's not. The joke of that movie is that it's about the fact that movies sometimes turned it into entertainment, turn it into a joke.
Exactly.
That the actors themselves and again, many people have talked about how I hear this on the right all the time. That you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today, right? That's one of their big refrains because everything is so politically correct and blah blah blah. Obviously, they have you never watched Tropic Thunder all the way through. I would argue in that situation, but also they have never seen the Chappelle Show, which is arguably the same kind of jokes about the same kind of stuff with the same kind of language that was all over Blazing Saddles. Right?
Yeah.
And written by who? A Jewish guy and a black guy. Mel Brooks co-wrote Blazing Saddles with Gene Wilder wrote a bunch, but with Richard Pryor. That's right. And Neil Brennan and Dave Chappelle created the Chappelle Show. And it's funny how identical it is that, they're like, you couldn't even do it. I'm like, you could not only do it, but it's no longer an R movie. You could watch it on basic cable with commercials, right? So, this is the same kind of people where like Tucker Carlson was on YouTube yesterday in his 8th video of the day that they were posting about the Iran war, saying this is the most censored period of time we have ever lived in. And, voices are being eliminated from the conversation.
Allow me to upload this for everybody in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. I would like to put this on theinternetisforever.com, right? It's extraordinarily stupid. I happen to love Tropic Thunder, and some people get upset at some of the language and some of the tropes that are in that without recognizing that the point of the entire movie is that every actor in it is a maniac. They are a self-involved psychopaths. And even in their renewed sense of self at the end where they learn a lesson and they succeed at the end, they're still jerks. That's the point. Like, he is mocking how actors and writers will sometimes go, I want to do a war movie to show what I'm made of, and we crying? We're not crying. Right? Action Jackson can't cry. That's what we're talking about. That's what that's about, right? Right. So good. And Robert Downey Jr. will occasionally, I'll see something pop up online about the fact that he, quote unquote, did blackface in the movie. He did not. He played a character who is an idiot and a self-involved maniac. That's the point, so that's crucial to the conversation. So anyways,
someone in the chat put in that it was Tom Cruise's greatest movie, which is hard to argue.
Yeah, it's pretty terrific. Yeah.
It was so good.
And the fat hands were his idea. Like when they were creating the character, he was like, I want to dance, and B, I want fat hands. And I think it
Isn't that
was
the one where he had like almost no hair and then,
yeah,
like, a
yeah. Oh,
shiny
he's
bald
huge.
head? Yeah.
He's in a fat suit but he's got real. If you look at his hands, particularly, well, and this might just be a fixation of his, but whenever you see somebody wearing a prosthetic fat suit, oftentimes their hands are still normal size, and there are very few
Oh yeah.
versions of it where they've actually on like Fat Bastard in the Austin Powers movies. They did it, to make sure it was filled out. They, put the extra time in. But a lot of times it's
There's
one
a
of the
great
things they skip.
lawyer in It's Almost Sunny in Philadelphia with giant fake hands on
Yeah.
because he has small hands, so he wears these huge hands.
Right.
He's like, don't hands.
Right. So yeah, and in many ways, the fat hands reference seems to be a reference to Donald Trump, Harvey Weinstein, because Harvey Weinstein was
really?
Yeah.
Did he have fat hands?
And then I don't know where you might have heard this, but it relates to someone that we know of that's currently serving in the White House. Right? That was the Trump has a Diet Coke button on his that he put on the desk, and that was, it was almost a premonition. It's like when the Simpsons tell the future.
For real.
We have real news coming up, I promise, but we have to get to a couple of these things just to take the edge off. I think there's so much awful going on. So a little bit of like upfront Schadenfreude has to happen. I don't know if you know about the OpenAI trial that is coming in April.
So this was news to me. I did not know that.
So Elon Musk was one of the first investors in OpenAI when it was, he gave money to OpenAI when it started. I almost used the trick he's using in court. He calls it investor. You can invest in a charity. And right now, when they initially started, it was going to be open AI. It was going to be an open source AI that, was free to use and everything. And they're transitioning because they can't possibly run the servers necessary for an AI that's that good without some profit somewhere. Somebody's got to pay for this. They're not going to just be able to run off the kindness of strangers. Or if they are, it will be from, foreign governments and certain investors who will want to, direct it in ways that are untoward. So better to be a for-profit company or, that's traded openly or that people can buy a subscription to, which will drive, the value point in a more ethical direction. That was their thinking. So he was one of the investors when it was OpenAI as a project, like it was a GitHub exercise. And then when they started going towards it being a profitable company, they are now currently estimated to be worth about $135 billion. That was their valuation as a company. Now, they are apparently spending somewhere in the order of $180 billion, with the point of being a $300 billion to $1 trillion company in the next decade, right? That's their point. So at the low end, they break even. At the top end, they're hugely successful in the Apple realm of things. Okay. And so Elon Musk is suing them for damages. He is suing them for what the money he lost by being an early investor in what is effectively a charity, and not getting to ride along with them on this money-making endeavor that they're going in, because he left. He was kicked off the board and took his ball and went home. And by and large, I think a good portion of his money, if I'm not mistaken, but that'll come out in the trial. And now he's mad because it's a big, successful company. It's the #1 AI company in the world. And Grok sucks. And so he's 5th right now. And by the way, he's only 5th in the namesake awareness of like the Twitterati in terms of AI companies. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's OpenAI, and then it's Anthropic, which has Claude, and then it's Perplexity, and then you almost throw in the other two, like DeepSeek or Qwen or one of these other, Alibaba, the Chinese models that they have, which I believe is Qwen right now, and then Grok's way at the bottom, and he is announcing all these. He just fired a bunch of people. Like they did this purge, a Doge-like purge at XAI, and two plus. I know, like just this week, one of the big founding members left in a huff, and he posted his huff on Twitter. But if you'll recall, and maybe some people don't know, earlier, I guess middle of last year or whatever, during the last year, he folded Twitter into XAI to give it the illusion of profitability, because he buys X, it's losing money. XAI at that point, because of venture capital it had coming in, investor money, looked like it was flush. So to make Twitter look like it was financially flush, he made it a part of XAI. And then, of course, all the investors were like, ooh la la, he's going to use all the Twitter data to train his AI. So it's just this free-flowing information and imaging thing that he could pull from all the time. And we'll hit that on the way back. But and then, of course, did a big a merger with SpaceX of XAI after, without telling the investors that basically XAI and X are both losing money. Like in the window where they looked artificially flush, he folded it into SpaceX, which is kept afloat by government contracts. So congratulations, everybody. We are all, as taxpayers, keeping his entire empire afloat. And floating it is in the punch bowl. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. And thank you, Hal Vickery. I got to say this on the other side of the break. That's so lovely. I can barely stand it. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Yeah. So Musk's economist, he doesn't have an accountant. His economist assessed OpenAI's total liability to him of somewhere between $78 billion and $135 billion. They owe him $78 to $135 billion.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Right. And he goes, and OpenAI's counter is straightforward. Donors to a nonprofit organization do not hold an ownership interest or expect financial return, making Musk's equity-style damages theory inapplicable from the outset. Like, if you invested, if you gave money to, I don't know, the ASPCA, right? In the arms of an angel, right? If you, and they turned into a for-profit company at some point. All the donors and people who gave money, no matter if they left their entire fortune to them when they died, or and their family wants it back, it wouldn't matter, or they gave $5 a month, it doesn't matter. It was a charity then. You gave it as that. If they turn into something else, you had a chance. I guess you could have bought in when that was happening, just like anybody else could at the VC run. But anyways, it's pretty hilarious. But but there's something particularly ironic about it that I want to bring up that I like when we come back. So stupid, it makes my blood boil. Yeah, and then we'll get right into the Iran and Karg Island. Because yowza.
$60 seconds.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Karg.
Karg. Yeah, we'll bring that up in a second. I yeah. Well, we'll think about that when we're coming back. And chat room. Hi.
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
Okay, one last note on the Elon Musk's front, because I find it particularly funny and hilarious and right up his alley in terms of where things are headed for him, no matter what he does. But first, I want to thank Hal Vickery for the super chat. That was so lovely. He gave us his age that's coming up on Thursday. Happy birthday, early birthday, our dear friend Hal Vickery. With combined with how old I feel after 14 months of Trump's second term. Which can, I'll leave the number up to you if you're listening on the radio. But it's very lovely. Thank you so much for your support, super chats, and our of course our wonderful Patreon folks, of which Hal Vickery is one as well, are how we stay afloat and how the show exists. So thank you so much, and how I can give Johnny Million gas money when I force him to drive into the studio 2 weeks in a row.
Force me. So very generous.
Yes. So, all right. So one more thing on the Elon Musk thing that I find particularly funny. It's one that he's seeking damages that equal the total valuation of OpenAI, which is silliness. And I think that's, one of those things like have them settle and toss you $1 billion because you need that cash right now to shore up Grok, which sucks. And the funny thing about Grok and that part is that he trained it to be a jerk and to be a truth-seeking, lightning bolt, and that it'll tell you the truth even if the truth seems racist to you or sexist to you or ahistorical.
You can't handle the truth,
right? Yeah, you can't handle the Grok is essentially their sales pitch, and it's. The problem with it is that it also runs this kind of algorithm that on first blush always protects Musk, Tesla, and Twitter itself, and XAI and SpaceX. It will always bloviate about how awesome it is. Now, part of that is because it's his AI, and he very well could have. You all right there? Did you
hear that? That was a cat running down the hallway.
Yes, I did. That was great. Not only has he trained this particular model, so it's very possible that he could have simply trained it to, like his stuff and, censored it like China did with the DeepSeek AI that they put out. But it's also very possible that he has fixed the algorithm on Twitter where it is mostly trained to be a boosting site for X and XAI and SpaceX, so that all of its input is half Nazi, half Muscovite, right? That yeah. All the input that it gets is just that the sun shines out of his backside, and ketamine's a wonder drug, I guess. And so, in this trial, a couple of points to watch out for when it's coming up. In this trial, OpenAI has been wanted to introduce the fact that all during their negotiations with him, to kind of try and reach some sort of settlement during the more, their more magnanimous period around this, where they were going to allow him to transfer what he was doing and stay involved into a buy-in, but he had, he was on ketamine the entire time. That's what they want to argue. And the judge is saying, you can't bring in his ketamine use. And OpenAI's response was, but he was at Burning Man every time we talked to him. And so, during this whole negotiation, he was at Burning Man, and we could tell he was out of his mind. And how do we, and I don't doubt that they've got really expensive lawyers who will find a way to sort of backdoor that admission into the, what'd you do while you were at Burning Man? Did you, So that's how it's going to, and they will, I'm sure there'll be plenty of objections and sustains running around, but that's a fun part that they're trying to prove, that basically while they were trying to negotiate and be nice with him, he was on ketamine. And more importantly, the irony is that Musk is suing OpenAI for turning OpenAI into a for-profit scheme, while he was simultaneously running XAI, which originally started as a benefit corporation, meaning a charity. He was going to, the XAI was going to be his, I'll show OpenAI, I'm going to do my open source free one for the people. And then he was, at the same time he was suing them about them transitioning to a for-profit model, he was doing the exact same thing. It's exactly the kind of behavior you would expect from somebody who hangs around with Donald Trump. Now, particularly hilarious. I look forward to how this plays out. I don't know if there'll be cameras in the courtroom, but if you think Donald Trump nods off in business meetings, wait till you see a tweaky Elon Musk taking substances to remain awake during whatever portion of it he has to be there for. And I would argue a good portion of it he will not be there for. This is a civil trial. No. He doesn't have to be present for it to make the argument. And the judge cannot read into whether you are there personally. Donald Trump could tell everybody firsthand about this because that's how he used to, he handles it. You just send, you send your fixers in. Now, big doings have obviously happened. And we're going to talk about the stuff that has happened in Ukraine when Philip joins us in the next hour. He was supposed to be on Wednesday, but he missed us because of the time change. And I'm gonna rub that in, poor guy, because we were all worried about him. Because he's in a war zone. Bless his heart. Yeah. And I'm only teasing, but we genuinely, I spent it. I'm sure our regular listeners and a lot of people who watch both the Wednesday and the Saturday show online, I'm sure they have an occasional tinge of when they hear a story about what's going on in Ukraine, or when it hasn't been on the headlines, that you're like, I hope he's okay. Obviously, the big moves this week is retaliation from the Iranians in terms of closing the Strait of Hormuz, or throttling traffic to the point where oil is now at $100 a barrel, and conceivably will go up above that if this continues for long. There's been some moves, and we'll talk about that, but we talked a little bit about Karg Island, and a couple, in the beginning of this, maybe last week, and certainly on my live stream, just because it sounds like a sci-fi movie site. It's like Karg Island sounds like, where Dr. Evil has his place, or where King Kong is. King Karg lives there. But 90% of the oil that is processed from Iran goes through Karg Island. And so middle of last week, there was this big breaking story that the U.S. was very upset that Trump threw a fit in the Oval Office and about not signing off on Israel hitting oil sites inside of Iran, because Trump believes that the spoils, to the victor go the spoils, that we should have kept the oil in the Iraq war, that this is really a resource war masked as a bunch of, as proactive self-defense. And he's worried that it's going to drive oil prices up if they can't get their oil out, and then they can't sell it on the open market, and oh darn. Well, that was certainly undercut by the fact that Trump apparently heard about the 90% of their oil going through Karg Island and picked the target himself. It sounded like the biggest, it was a big splashy target, so he decided he was going to hit it, and of course you'll be shocked to hear that he said they totally obliterated it. The U.S. has said it is totally obliterated Iranian missile assets on Karg Island, the hub for roughly 9% of Iran's crude exports, while insisting the oil infrastructure itself was spared. No. Iran has disputed the extent of the damage and is threatening retaliatory strikes on regional oil facilities and U.S.-linked sites in the Gulf, which of course they will. The Strait of Hormuz remains partially disrupted, with Trump signaling that U.S. Navy tanker escorts are coming soon, which he's been saying for a week now, which can't happen till the end of the month anyways. And also, that will entail us possibly having mines strike our vehicles, our ships in the area. Cool. Which is helping keep oil above $100. He also eased sanctions on Russia, allowing them to sell more oil at a time when oil was spiking almost a perfect storm to help them out. And Israel is striking targets inside Iran and Lebanon, preparing for a larger offensive against Hezbollah while ordering evacuations around industrial areas in Tabriz ahead of further strikes. But other than that, pretty quiet on the Western Front.
Yeah,
we'll be back right
like
after this. Yeah. And the oil impact, is predictable and obvious, and somehow Trump didn't know. We'll be back. So I got tired of going to all the different sites. Many people on the live stream, know that I end up going to all these different sites to find, oil prices and all that stuff. And so I just decided to have Claude Cowork make me a web page with all the details that I want, and I look up all the time, like there you go. Crude oil prices, gas prices, where the S&P is in relation to this. The stock stuff. It seems it got this backwards. Like green is down and or green arrow is pointing down, but it's going up. It's it's backwards. So I just read it backwards. It just made it this morning. And it's something I can also fix or whatever. Like hold on. Let's see the stock indicators. Oops, I can type. I don't want to yell at it. I'm in all caps. Never yell at your AI. It might, you want it to. It's like that Dane Cook bit about
it'll hold a grudge.
Being friendly to the psycho at work. Because on the day he comes to shoot everybody up, he walks by. And goes,
F you, you're cool.
You're thanks for the candy bar, or whatever. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. Also, hovering over stock gives full name. There you go. In case I don't know some of these stupid defense contractor things. Yeah, Brent crude is at 103.14. And then, there's this whole kill me, feel it in my bones nonsense. Did you hear that quote from Trump?
No.
Okay, hold on.
60 seconds.
Thank you. We really do have like ads. Look at us. Yeah. Yeah, here it is. I think.
An excursion. We had the greatest economy in history. We do.
You can hear that, right? That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Is it loud enough? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'll play it when we get back. This is just... I mean, it's not surprising. And, with Blumenthal and others coming out basically going, every time I walk out of one of their briefings, I feel dumber, essentially.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Excuse you.
Big boy.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program.
Battle stations, everybody. Let's go, 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 go.
Mega Worldwide.
Welcome back. So, the one of the scarier things, that I guess people are reacting to about this is, when's this going to be over? When's, how do we know? How's it going to affect everything? And obviously, the expectation is that even with just the Strait of Hormuz shutting down, even if the Iranians don't retaliate massively and sink American ships and it's a full-out war, that's enough to starve a lot of people. And they know it.
Oh, yeah.
And they, and Trump has gone, he more than anybody, he's been all over the map. Like, We've got Hegseth, who looks like a frat boy doing a bad George Bush impersonation with this kind of like choppy hands. We believe in fighting, not being frightened. You know, whatever his ridiculous white rapper kind of, douchebag George Bush impersonation thing that he's doing. His whole thing is
energy.
It's up to the president. He's got his hand on the throttle and on the steering wheel, and it's just like analogy for being, I don't know, Top Gun. I think it's a Top Gun analogy is what he's going for. It's just really pitiful every time he says it. But the idea is that he's shifting blame to the president, which is, by the way, where the responsibility lies. But also, you can tell that he's arguing for more the entire time. And the briefings have become increasingly desperate and embarrassing. This week, he, of course, was offering rewrites of headlines for all the news organizations. He's like, I saw this headline, war expanding. Should have said something like Iran hiding. It got really pitiful. And you're like, okay, I get it if you're not the Secretary of War, or the Secretary of Defense in this situation. If you're the spokesperson for this, then, you'd expect the Trump administration to, put out a Baghdad Bob to talk about this. And arguably that's what Hegseth is. Hegseth is not the real Secretary of War. There was not a single decision about any of this that he is making. He is absolutely not. He is not even the conduit. Trump talks to Kane directly.
Can you imagine, like putting the keys in that guy's hands?
Oh my God, yeah.
It's just the mouthpiece.
Well, I mean, if you look at how the war is being, executed in terms of its timing and its impact, not the tactical part of it, which is in the military's hands, but the rest of it, it looks like a DUI, but Trump's response this week was probably singularly responsible for oil went up to like 120 and then it dropped down to 80 and everybody's like, see, you guys are all just weak-kneed and this is just traders panicking. And then Trump said this.
I'm doing something about it. And I had to take an excursion. We had the greatest economy in history. We still do. Oh, this will bounce right back. When it's over, and I don't think it's going to be long, when it's over, this is going to bounce right back so fast.
When are you going to know when it's over?
When I feel it.
Okay.
I feel it in my bones.
Will you ask anybody?
When I feel it in my bones is the answer. Okay, well, that answer by itself drove oil back up over $100 from 80 to about where it is now, about 103.
It's maddening.
Yeah, that is it's absurd to the extreme, obviously. And I don't think any of us expect.
He was talking to a friendly journalist too, right?
Yes, who is the single dumbest person working at Fox, and that's saying a lot. Yes. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people at Fox that are stupid and cruel, but they're not dumb. They know they're lying. Kilmeade's one of those people who's not sure if he's lying when he says something. If something sounds good, it must be right from his point of view. And that's a scary spot to be in. But he is, in many ways, it makes him the perfect, Fox host, the Fox and Friends host anyways. And it's actually what probably put him at odds with Steve Doocy on occasions, where Steve Doocy would occasionally, balk. He's basically disappeared. His son's still working.
He would accidentally ask a real question.
Right, exactly. Because you can't not. At some point, your own self-image overrides the circumstance you're in, and you're like, I can't act this dumb. And Kilmeade's like, I am this dumb. I'll gladly put it that way. So right now, just to catch everybody up on where stuff is, WTI crude, which is West Texas, is $98.71 barrel. Largely because it does not have to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. But general, like Brent crude, where, that the rest of the world has access to, is at 103. That drives up the price of WTI crude, which is up 47% since the beginning of the year. It's the price of Brent crude is almost doubled, essentially, like gone up by a third, essentially, in real money since the beginning of the war. And it was humming right along at a relatively low number because, again, we have an oil glut. There's not enough oil in the market. You could argue that we've had wars for oil before, but this is actually a way to make it a valuable product again when it is increasingly not.
Yeah.
Yeah. The S&P is down 3%. Gas, U.S. gas price is at 420 average. So smoke them if you got them, I guess. Including the fact that the IEA did an emergency release from strategic reserves of 400 million barrels. The Hormuz disruption has, give or take, 20 million barrels per day. Out of that, it is at a near complete halt. And the cost of the war per week, $11.3 billion a week. These are early Iraq and Afghanistan numbers.
And they cannot afford health care.
Right. Yes. And again, 1 week of this war could solve homelessness forever. Remember that. This is something that I think Democrats can hit on. That if Trump had just put those funds that he was going to put into this and delayed a week, he could have still had his stupid war. He could have spent the same amount of money in that week and solved homelessness in the United States. And that is, watch for that to become a constant refrain, both in Democratic House races and Senate races, and then ultimately the presidency. That the America First crowd and the Make America Great Again crowd, who have become disgruntled with Trump, while they will not be on board for any of the social aspects of the Democratic agenda, gay rights, trans rights, women's rights, minority rights, they'll still be just as anti-DEI as anybody, but their level of self-interest will at least drive them to either not vote for a Republican in the next round of a couple of elections, which is where Fuentes and the rest of these crowd are driving these folks, or they will actively vote for Democrats as a way of punishing Republicans, or because a few of them are realizing that things really are better off when Democrats run stuff. And that if it wasn't for these bizarre, socially violent dust-ups that Republicans throw into the fan every single time, trans rights in and of itself is an issue created by the bigotry of the right. That it would have just been an element of social experimentation and shifting change in the growth of society that would have happened with relative grace had an army of maggots online not decided that to put a target on the back of every trans person and make it their cause célèbre that they deny them rights. And the pushback becomes, it vacillates in. They draw everybody onto the same piece of ground, and they determine the means and the methodology of the fight itself. They set the terms for how a very important topic will be discussed, and then they find a way to wind it down into something as base as possible, so that people can't just get along. That's the purpose of the
What's a
Republican
woman?
Party. Right.
Well, but can you answer what a woman is?
Yeah. That's what Walsh's whole thing was. And by the way, a woman is not a female, even in the marker of it. It's a female who's grown up. In theory, it's a colloquialism. Man and woman are colloquialisms more than their genders. They are because somebody, for example, Donald Trump is an adult biological male, but he is by no means a man.
He's not a man.
Right.
Nope.
So the irony that they want to, that's where they want to have their fight when they follow, quote unquote, especially in terms of, how it's what these terms are understood to mean in their most poetic sense, that they have the most unmanly men and the Marjorie Taylor Greens of women in that regard. And I guess, Boebert would, peg the meter for them, something like that, or that's what Kristi Noem was there for, kind of this paper doll. But for the most part, no. So, anyways, that's where they draw it onto this field where they will ultimately lose. But Democrats don't want to sacrifice trans people on the altar of pointing out the hypocrisy of these people and making this argument, more. Seem more reasonable or viable than it is. Just like, again, disdain and mockery, I think, are our best tools to deal with people who are not serious and are not, they're not honest players in a debate about any of these things. And that's built in as well. Because again, Look at TikTok and the destabilization that the Chinese government wants to do. Look at Russia supporting Donald Trump as a chaos agent. These are not things where they're like, they want the U.S. to go one direction. What they want is infighting. And they will, and that managed infighting is fairly easy to pull off. The problem is it does have a limited runway. And it will butt up against reality if you push somebody too far. It's one of the reasons we were concerned about attacking Iran, is that there's a nationalistic reflex that happens amongst certain members of the populace. Maybe it's half, maybe it's less than half, but if they join the military, you've got a civil war or infighting or a ground war that will grind on for a very long time. Many of the Taliban leaders and the tribal leaders were very happy to just kind of move back to their corner of Afghanistan and pretend the rest of the country doesn't exist. But when attacked, they all joined together because they viewed it as somebody's coming to wipe us all out. Sinwar and Hamas viewed Trump recognizing the Golan Heights, moving the embassy to Jerusalem, recognizing it as the capital, as an act, as a predisposition towards war, that they are doing this to set up the stage where Israel is going to expand, take back the West Bank, take back Gaza, and therefore they felt they needed to plan for the end times. This is the big fight. Here it comes. So we'll rope a dope for a while, which is exactly what they did. There was
the end times.
Yep, it's always fun. We'll talk about that a little bit on the other side, because why not? I went a blaze past the break, but we got to take one. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. My charts are better now, Johnny Bays. I made my charts better. They have, and these are my projected directions. They should be brighter, but whatever. But here's oil and gas going straight down because we're in an oil glut, artificially inflated by limited supply already, and then pow! I mean, and if you knew the day, oil was selling fairly low. If you knew the day, like a bunch of people, no wonder Nutlick was chuckling every time he was in the Oval, right? He knew it was coming. He knew the date. Through all these different proxies he's got set up, he can buy. Notice how everybody's like, people in Congress shouldn't be able to trade stocks. The president shouldn't be able to have holdings or whatever, but the cabinet, nobody brings that up. I mean, I'm sure somebody has, but it's really a minor consideration. And I would argue in cases where the president's brain is tapioca like Trump's, everybody in there who could sit in that meeting is just checking things on their calendar. Okay, war starts here, day before, buy a bunch of this. There was that story about the poly market trader, right, who is getting everything right and winning a ridiculous amount of money, and everybody thinks it's somebody inside the administration who actually knows.
60 seconds.
Yep.
It always reminds me of the Muppet Show.
Yay! What does?
60 seconds.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, there's one other thing too that it's in my notes. Son of a. Yeah. Excuse you.
Yeah, my chair is so squeaky.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, totally a squeaky chair.
It's actually squeaky.
Now back to Hal Sparks on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT AM.
So a lot has been made about why this war and why now, right? According to Marco Rubio, it's because the Israelis were going to do it and we didn't want to, we had FOMO, we got a bad case of FOMO. And so, or we were worried that we're going to get retaliated at because if Israel start this, so we must knock out their sites so that they can't return fire at us for not doing anything. Right. That's the back and forth. And Hegseth is because, God and country, something like that. He's basically he's basically turning this into a religious war overtly. I would also like to point out that when Hegseth starts talking about this at this briefings, where he basically opens the thing with a prayer and is doing this whole God's on our side kind of storyline. It sounds an awful lot like somebody whose career is flailing coming out with a gospel record. When country artists
you got to turn to God after a while.
they start to flag, right? Or somebody finding Jesus in prison. It's a good way to turn things around, right? Because it's real. If you doubt me or you push back, you're offending everybody who really does believe this, right? And you don't want to upset those folks, So, to use the terms of the day, you're calling in an airstrike on your own position when you do that, right? So, the other one is Israel tells us what to do, and I would argue that while Israel clearly has kinetic goals in the area that are very easy to spot, and in the crayons and hammers news cycle that we live in, they very well certainly were pushing for this. They very well certainly benefit from it. But the big beneficiaries of it are the other countries that are getting hit by Iran, and everybody's like, why is Iran hitting these countries? Well, maybe it's because the Iranian leadership knows that those countries are mortal enemies to them, Sunni versus Shia, that they have as much to do with this starting when it did and how fiercely it did as anybody else. And they're not buying this idea that there's just a target on Israel and the U.S. is back, and that Donald Trump is paying more attention to what MBS wants than Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been pushing for this since Trump's first term, even before October 7th.
Oh, yeah.
You could argue
found a precedent stupid enough to do this.
Exactly. And this has been part of the PNAC plan for a very long time. But you couldn't do it because of the wild card in this circumstance was the leadership of the other countries. How would Saudi Arabia handle it? How would the UAE handle it? And that's a lot of money. It's $1 trillion in the U.S. stock market. Now, in the early 2000s, late 90s, $1 trillion in our stock market was how the Saudis kept us on a short leash. Because if they decided in a day, because they were so oil rich or perceived to be oil rich at that time, if they yanked their $1 trillion out of the market, it would create a vacuum. There was no E-Trade, Robinhood. There was no open market for, where regular people could buy and sell stocks without having a trader present. So that rug pull would not have a bunch of average people using their stimmy checks, say from COVID, to rush in and go, I'm going to buy $3,000 worth of Apple stock as it's dropping to next to nothing, right? Because I know it'll go back up and this is temporary. And it's not because of the company's value. It's because this country has attacked us. But you couldn't do that back then. And so they had a lot of sway. They could threaten this all the time. And one of the things that they wanted was a relative stability, because the oil transit through the Strait of Hormuz was definitely going to take a hit. But now, as they try to transition away from oil with Project 2030, and I think Kuwait has Project 2040 now, but between the UAE and the Saudis, they are trying to get out of the oil business. It's a diminishing return. It's a dying commodity, and they're gonna, if they don't find some other way to transition into a way to make money and support their countries, which is why they're basically turning them into Vegas / the Cayman Islands. That's the entire purpose of these countries right now. And Saudi Arabia has the one benefit of Mecca and Medina as permanent tourist destinations for every Muslim in the world. So they're guaranteed 1 billion people will have to flow through there at some point to make the Hajj, and you can glom $16 off every single one of them. That's $16 billion over the course of a period of time. Those kind of things. They could count on a certain amount of flow through, hotels, travel, food, and everything else they'll do while they're there. They're not just going to come and go. They'll hang out for a little while. Like, they're looking at the industry that evangelical Christians have made in Israel, for example, right? And from that, they've gone, wow, we've got a lot. There are a lot more of Muslims that have to come than there are Christians that want to go to Bethlehem or Jerusalem, right? So they know this, but they had to sign off on this. And we are just at a junction point where the PNAC plan, the domino was closer to being tipped than ever before with the uprisings of the Iranian people over the last little bit, and and Trump being the perfect guy to not care about the blowback because last term he's made his money. They're promising him $6 billion minimum on the back end.
He knows he's going to die in a few months.
Right. He knows he's not going to heaven, so what the heck does it matter anymore? Which is apparently the scariest thing for maggots currently online is, Candace Owens and others have been freaking out like, this man keeps saying he's not going to heaven, which means, better to, rule in hell than serve in heaven, crosses her mind, I'm sure, in terms of that. But I've been thinking about other reasons why we might have started this war when we did. And oftentimes, for something this extraordinary, it has to check several boxes. It can't just be, this is a distraction from the Epstein files. You're like, well, we've got other things we can do to distract from the Epstein files. We use the Save America Act, and get our people fighting amongst each other and pretend Democrats are going to cheat in the election. Cheating in the election's big. That works with them, right? That you could do that. Yeah. That'll pull away from Epstein for a little while. You could blow up some more drug boats, I guess. You could talk about how much Venezuelan oil. You could threaten Colombia and start talking about cocaine, which is on that you could bomb inside of Ecuador, which we are doing. We're also doing that. I'm just saying for the record that we are doing strikes inside Ecuador. But so that could cover the Epstein files for the time being, anyways, at least through the midterms or into the middle of the summer. And you could use the infighting amongst your own as fuel to like, they're just trying to divide us. The Democrats are doing this. Thomas Massey's terrible. Trump did his Massey, anti-Massey rally, which went very badly and actually raised Massey's numbers, poll numbers specifically. Sure. So
draw attention to him. Streisand affect that guy.
That's right. So the Epstein files, is that part of it? Absolutely. Is it the fact that perhaps the tariffs aren't working? Is the fact that the Supreme Court not only ruled against them, but it was not a big payday for the American people. We didn't get $1 trillion a year in tariffs. As a matter of fact, the tariff intake was pretty normal considering even the height of it, partly because a bunch of them were turned on and then turned off and then turned on and then turned off, and they never actually went into action. All they did was stifle business buying from stuff overseas because they didn't know whether they were going to have to pay, so they put off expenditures. And then when they turned off, they buy a bunch of stuff, which would temporarily jack up and give the illusion of growth. And Trump will look, everybody's buying tractors and everybody's buying stuff. It's because if they're going to get one, they don't know if these tariffs are going to come on and be on for the rest of Trump's term. So if there's a gap in it, you've got to buy it during that gap. So people front loaded this and they put themselves in debt to do it. So farms are in debt, all this other. Okay. The tariffs aren't working and they're not going to work. So this is also, this checks a box on covering that. But check this out. A recent global macro snapshot shows that the U.S. revising Q4 growth down to 0.7%. That
so does
alone.
That mean I'm not getting my check from the government?
Yeah, probably. You're not going to get your tariff dividend check. Yeah. 0.7%. Trump was selling that we've got 5% growth, which is a number he borrowed from China, which is also fake from their end. And they revised it down to 0.7% in the last quarter. This before all this nonsense happened. This before the price of oil went up and the tariffs got stuck at 15% everywhere on everything for 150 days because Donald Trump is mad at the Supreme Court, who he installed everybody. They should do what he wants. And so to the coin flippers, to the folks out there that are saying, it's, 6 of one, half dozen of another, between Democrats and Republicans, I present to you COVID Part 2, the crappening. We'll be back after this with our dear friend Philip Bittner, who's in Kyiv, and more Johnny Million. He's got a live stream. It's called It's Johnny Million.
I do.
Back. YouTube and Twitch.
And Facebook.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Cool. Nice. I didn't know that you'd added Facebook to that.
I did. I'm a pro on Restream.
Nice. I'm very proud. You could probably stream on TikTok, which again is now part of Larry Ellison's entire thing. I can't do it. They kick me off because apparently I say too many anti-Trump,
Yeah, I was thinking of trying that because Facebook keeps kicking me off when I play bass along with real songs.
Yeah. There's Phil. Hold on one second. Let me bring
Yay,
him in
Phil.
here. Yeah, hold on. I
Yay.
edit this real quick.
Yay.
Here we go. All right, let me bring in both of you guys. There you go. Look at that. And move his
Yeah, Phil.
name
Phil's
up.
got lights, baby.
Test. Yeah, no. We have electricity. We actually have done for quite some.
Yeah. Right.
Don't want to jinx it.
Yeah, no jinx. Knocking on wood over here.
Mm.
I bet that just made my cats run to the door. I have no idea why they know that that's what happens, but they go running to the front door when we knock on anything.
They're training for their it's their audition for that cat food commercial or Chewy or whatever drop stuff off. Yeah.
I remember when I lived in a small apartment in Chicago, my cat at the time, Wendy, would every time my landline would ring in the mid-90s and I would go running over to the phone, she would run right ahead of me. And I guess she just figured out it's what we do. You know, we run to the phone when it rings. But I'm like, are you getting calls while I'm not here? Why do you run to the phone?
So what? Yeah, presumably what happened when you weren't at home and somebody called you.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you run to the phone? Yeah. Hello.
Meow.
Also, did you name her Wendy because you were going through your Jack Torrance period? Wendy.
She was Wendy because
Give me the bat, Wendy.
A fish called Wanda.
Oh, okay. I wonder. Yes, darling.
Oh, with a W for Wendy.
I wonder.
I wonder.
God, such a good movie.
Yeah.
So good.
So good.
I'm going to kill you.
It's coming to kill me.
Didn't Kevin Kline win Best Supporting for that?
Yes, he did.
And not only that, the scene where they're in the lover nest, on the River Thames, and he does, and he's trying to seduce her by speaking a foreign language because she has that fetish.
Yeah.
You know what he says? He says in Russian, "My hovercraft is full of eels."
Oh, that's so awesome.
If you know Monty Python is the Hungarian translation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
my nipples explode with delight. Right. Yeah.
Oh, that is so brilliant.
In A Fish Called Wanda, he does.
Right.
He says
Russian. In Russian, my hovercraft is full of eels.
It's one of the perfect callbacks, like in L.A. Story when they've broken up and Steve Martin is outside Victoria Tennant's window and he's reading. He goes, "Let me read. There comes a time when it's now or never. It's now or never. Let me read to you from this book of poetry. Oh pointy birds, oh pointy pointy, anoint my head." And she shuts the window on him. That's from a joke in The Man with Two Brains. He brings a book of poetry to Kathleen Turner when she's in the hospital after her brain operation from John Lillison, England's most famous one-armed poet. And he reads Pointy Birds to her as she's sitting in bed. And so I got to tell you, I love that through line so much. I'm trying to work out this thing with my agents where I can do a bunch of guest stars of like under 5 characters, where just like a guy on Law and Order going, "I don't know, I didn't see anything, but the guy was running down the street, but I want to be wearing the same shirt in all of them." so that I can create this accidental MCU kind of thing where like I've created a cinematic universe. Like, oh my God, that's the same guy who got asked about the dead body in the Law and Order episode is now on an episode of The Pit with a wound in his stomach and he's wearing shit. Like, I so want to do that so bad.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll do it for scale. My only thing is I have to be wearing the same wardrobe. I get to wear my own wardrobe, right? And then
or as a sort of minor flesh wound.
Yeah,
10 seconds.
Thank you. Or like Les Nessman's Band-Aid, that he always has a Band-Aid on a different part of his head.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
Well, I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Puss-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back. Joining us now is our dear friend Philip Ittner, who's live in Kyiv. He's actually got power right now, which makes us feel a lot better about all that. Johnny Million, of course, is farming questions from the chat room. Then they might have more than usual for him this week, so hopefully we'll be able to do that. Also, Andrea and CSL, in the staff chat, if you guys find any that we miss or whatever, feel free to throw them in there. A couple things I want to bring everybody up to speed on in terms of, the Russians have been really hitting Ukraine hard over the last, period. But they specifically, almost while Trump and the world is distracted with Iran, in the same way that they took advantage of the war in Gaza at the time. Russian forces, though, these are some things. This is from the Institute for the Study of War. Russian forces have deported Ukrainian civilians from Sumy Oblast border settlements to Russia in at least 2 separate incidents since December of 2025. So they've been basically abducting people from Sumy Oblast. The United Nations Independent International Commission for Inquiry, the IICOI, on Ukraine has determined that Russia's deportation and forced transfer of Ukrainian children amount to crimes against humanity. So there's some progress there, I guess, that finally the UN has recognized that they're snatching these children and that they are crimes against humanity. The Mariupol Occupation Administration sent 14 Ukrainian families to Vladimir Oblast for psychological and social rehabilitation. Russian government authorities are pursuing initiatives aimed at incentivizing Russian veterans of the war in Ukraine to resettle in occupied areas by offering them plots of land. So I mean, they don't even have control over, which is so insane. It's like, hey, why don't you go homestead the Wild West for us? That's exactly what this is. This is not dissimilar from what the Western push into Comancheria was, where they would give guys who were tired of fighting land and then give them access to arms and go let the Indians attack them essentially. Across the Mexican border, knowing these guys would defend their land. So you're basically in charge of this. And then later they could tax them out of it if they wanted to. This was the big fight around Comancheria for a while. The Kremlin has officially made the simplified procedure for Russian passportization in occupied Ukraine permanent. So, they're trying to force nationalize everybody there. And Sberbank and VTB are consolidating their control over financial services in occupied Ukraine as a means of increasing dependencies on the Russian banking system, basically to scoop up those funds. And then the Russian satellite broadcaster Ruski Mir and other Russian TV channels suffered a satellite failure, which disrupted TV service in occupied Ukraine because Space Force, I guess. It's hard to say. But mostly this seems to be they're moving to the strategy of sticking flags in the ground in areas that they've got while they continue these attacks with this kind of, I guess to sell the argument, I would look for Tucker Carlson and that crowd to go, these are Russians, obviously these are Russians in these areas. And these are Russian people. You'll hear that from them because the Russians have specifically moved those people in as pawns, as chess pieces, sit on this block and hold it.
There's some good news, however, for Ukrainians as well, in that down around the Dnipro and Zaporizhia front, which is not Donetsk, but it's more of the southeast part of the country, where the Russians had been trying to do an offensive to cross the river they've shot themselves in the foot by limiting communications. The Kremlin has shut off Telegram. Uh, uh, Musk has apparently switched off Starlink. I think the fact that the Kremlin has shut off Telegram is more telling because they've it's a way for the Russian soldiers to actually do encrypted communication between one another, but it also allows Russian citizens to get on Telegram channels and see that the war isn't going well. So the Kremlin was more concerned about Russian citizens seeing that the war is not going well. So they switched off Telegram, and in so doing, also limited their own soldiers to coordinate their attacks better. So it shows you the priority of Putin's Kremlin. He would rather have a narrative that that doesn't reveal how bad things are on the front.
Right.
That he'd rather limit that narrative than he would allow his own soldiers to be more effective on the battlefield. So there's that going on. Sadly, of course, because of everything that's going on with Iran, and oil, fossil fuel transportation, we're going to let the Russians get more money by letting them sell oil to, in particular, India. But, I don't think it's going to stop there. And that's going to give them a shot in the arm, which will allow them to buy weapons, to sell, to hire more soldiers internally within Russia. So, what's going on in Iran is going to help Russia. And we can go further into the Iran conflict because Russia's got a lot of fingers in that pie.
Absolutely, there's a lot of key bono in that area as well for Russia. When they talk about who benefits, everybody leaps immediately to Trump gets to hide the Epstein files and Israel gets to strike Iran because they want to, because Netanyahu. But there's a lot of other players that can point to why they would be all right with this, including anybody who makes their living off of oil, because of the declining price of oil, which is on a death spiral. It is moving downward, and there is no way to undo it as much as because even Trump's drill baby drill nonsense, if it were to play out the way he wants it to, would just it would lower the profitability of oil. And so there's, he's at odds with the companies themselves. And if he's going to introduce Venezuelan oil into the market in a much broader sense and run it through there, he'll make short-term money for Texas companies that process it, but the price of oil will continue to go down because we have an oil glut. The only thing that, any country, specifically Russia, who wants to benefit from this, gets more out of the Iran war going on for a while, the Strait of the Hormuz being shut down, and the need for freeing up Russian oil, which also at the exact same time raises the price of oil, is the shot in the arm, like you said, that they need. So let's take an early break, because I know we went a little bit later on the next one, and then we'll talk about that on the other side of this. But the Telegram thing, I don't think people grasp what a big deal that is, because I think in terms of our listeners and other people, the WhatsApp kind of thing is used. Some people use iMessage on your phone, but there really is. Telegram is the closest thing to, like, if people understand WeChat in China. It's not quite there, but it's pretty close. And to shut it down completely had a major impact, and it was as much a strategic blunder as any other made in the war so far. So we'll talk about that on the other side. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Don't forget to check out On the Edge, which is Phil's show. We'll be back right after this. Yeah. Right now there's a big problem in China with OpenClaw, the AI agent thing that everybody's using that's open sourced, because they can't stop it. and it doesn't require much at all. And you can set whatever model you want on it, and you can actually create. You could train models using it, meaning that you could take DeepSeek, for example, and go, here's everything China has done wrong in the last, 50 years. Here's everything we do. Here's our real economic data. Here's our real, everything you have access to from the outside world through a VPN. Feed it into it. Grow your own DeepSeek reel, and talk to it. Figure out what's really going on. And you can even give it access to a VPN through OpenClaw that it will hide itself on purpose. If you tell it, like, this is a game, you're playing against this, you should find your own way to VPN past this. And if you ever see anybody checking your logs, move to another channel immediately. And it can do it in milliseconds. And so China's not ready for this at all. And so WeChat, they used to be able to corral everybody into WeChat, and then they could limit it or whatever. This is like the wheels are coming off. And so it's much closer to the circumstance that, you don't want the...
Yeah, not exactly the same, but it does sound
This is Damian
similar.
Perdue of Think Theory Radio, Saturdays at 6 p.m. You're listening to Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
So this is, one of the fundamental factors of how the sort of Chinese economic and social system works is that people use their phones for everything. They pay for everything through an app called WeChat. And there was a period where Elon Musk, and it's probably still true, where through his Doge crypto and X, he wants to create a thing where Twitter is effectively the American WeChat. He, in his past with PayPal, you'll pay for things through that, and nobody trusts him enough to go into that. So he dropped that a while back, basically because trust is the biggest part of it, or forced trust in the case of WeChat. Telegram isn't quite there. It's not quite the everybody uses it for everything. And I talked about during the break the fact that OpenClaw, which is this thing that is spreading through the AI community, if you look all over AI, X or any of these other places, you'll see people talking about AI agents, and OpenClaw being an open source one that you can make, and you can house it on a Raspberry Pi, like a little single board computer. It does not require a ton of processing power, and it can have access to any of the major models or of your choosing locally, or one of the big ones through an account. And it can mix and match. If it runs out of credits on one, it can bounce to the other. It can find its way around firewalls in China specifically, which is why it's a nightmare for them right now. And they're releasing their own state-sanctioned versions, basically, through all their different models to try and corral people into that. And so it is boxing out their normal way of operating so fast that it's hard for them to catch. Telegram is kind of the opposite of that, in that it was not forced by the government. It's certainly the Telegram's servers are in Russia by and large. And so I've always been hinky about Telegram anyways, because the idea that they don't have a backdoor key to it is absurd. There's just no way they would allow it to be built there and not have access to every message sent on Telegram. It is arguably why Hegseth and these guys all get busted on Signal. They used to use Telegram. The Jan 6ers used Telegram. Everybody was using Telegram. They all switched to Signal all at once. And it was by and large because, as political favors shift, Putin has access to all of the documentation, anything you put on Telegram. In this particular case, though, they were also making use of it for their own purposes. Like you said, they were using it to almost as a comms system with their soldiers, because the internet has become so important to civil areas that you can piggyback on it with encryption, and you don't need a secondary radio system. And
there's a Ukrainian multi-launch rocket system located here.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes from Telegram to Telegram to Telegram to Telegram within the Russian armed forces, so that they could coordinate who's closest.
Yeah.
Who can get there closest, fastest, so that we can hit this thing. And it was really effective. And it was something the Russian soldiers would use amongst themselves. But unfortunately for the Kremlin, it was also a source for Russian mill bloggers, guys who were kind of either in the military or adjacent to the military, who could say, hey, we got a lot of guys dying out here for stupid reasons. And, things are not going well. So Putin had to decide, the Kremlin and Putin had to decide which was more important, having an effective way of communication, locating targets, and coordinating attacks between Russian soldiers using Telegram as an encrypted communication device, or the mill bloggers who are out there saying, hey, the stuff that is out there in Russian mass media is not real.
Is a lie.
And it's not going well. And apparently, Putin and the Kremlin decided that it was more important to shut those guys up, the ones that were saying, hey, the war's not going well, than it was to have their own soldiers be able to communicate, coordinate, and,
well, effectively, not only did
operations. Which tells you what they're thinking.
Or not, right, or not thinking.
What's more important to them? And winning the war or controlling their people.
Yeah. And ultimately this is a war to control people. So it makes sense. The goal, the whole purpose of this is to control the Ukrainian people, for example. I will say it's interesting that not only does it allow the soldiers sort of an easy way to communicate amongst each other through encrypted formats that's available because they can just piggyback on anybody's Wi-Fi, any a router system, cell system in the area. So you effectively use the enemy's comms against them. Like, think about what this would be like in World War II or in the Vietnam War or something. If you could piggyback your radio signal on top of the U.S.'s radio signal or the Viet Cong's radio signal, that their transmitters helped carry your message to the next thing. If you're breaking up between signals, if you could piggyback on their wavelength, and just ride it effectively, send your message along it. Think of how that would have shifted, battles in the past. Like, it's absurd, right? So the idea that you can take advantage of the internet that's available, that everybody is using in occupied and non-occupied areas. You could fight right up to an area and literally get the internet signal from somebody who's on the other side of the firing line and borrow it to send signal messages to let your guys know. So the value towards these soldiers, in fighting would be immeasurable compared to what was available before, right? On top of that, to your mill blogger point, there was not only the fact that these guys could unfortunately tell the truth, and I think that's what they were tamping down on, but it also killed the ones that were effectively spies, operating as just truth tellers about the Ukraine war, like people within Ukraine, in Kyiv, in Lviv, in Odessa, who are, could just pose as online Ukrainian, Russian sympathizers, but were legally saying what they could, still had the ability through Telegram to send messages that were not just kind of vague and, giving, operational information. If they saw some trucks driving someplace or if they saw a boat parked somewhere, they could feed that, which is terrible enough. But genuine tactical information, real spy work, real documents that they could upload via Telegram and send, and they cut off that as well, because all of these things, they all have to go, or you get all of it or none of it. You have to, and so you're right about the whole. It's so important to keep their people in the dark about what's really going on that they literally eliminated some of the most miraculous technological advances in warfare they could take advantage of in modern times. Just piggybacking on.
We have some electrical wiring issues at the studio because of what we've gone through during winter with the surges and with the abrupt collapses of electricity, and so we're kind of off the air right now. We should be back on within about a week, but in the interim period, I was invited out to the southeast front in Ukraine, and I was with a battalion, the Martok battalion of drone operators who are part of the 11th Mechanized Brigade in the Ukrainian army, and they do everything. They do laboratories where they're altering drones to make them to weaponize them. They are training drone operators, and then they are also conducting combat operations. So these are the guys, these are the drone operators. These are the guys who fly a variety of different kind of drones, whether they're dropping 60 millimeter mortar rounds onto armored positions, or whether or not they're flying like a Mavic with an RPG round into a trench position. These are the guys who are doing it all.
Yeah,
and they are also the way they do it. And I'm going to be cautious here because
Oops, his audio went out right when he was going to be cautious.
Oh no!
Hold on. It's okay. We lost you there for a second, Phil. Your audio's. There you go. It's good. Uh-oh. Hold on. Yeah. Let's tell you what. Let's see. That's an audio thing. It's okay. We can't hear you right now.
I'll fix it.
No, you got it. You got it. It's better.
Yeah. No. We'll fix it in the break. I was out with these guys, and what they do is they do it's almost like a Zoom call. So, but instead of like your coworker in HR in one corner, or Susan from Human Resources, all different drone cameras, and then you have somebody in a command center saying the observational drone that's in corner second from the corner right, he sees something, and I'm going to send a kamikaze RPG drone to that location. So, camera 6, go to location 5, and it's literally a Zoom call. And what the guys who were with me were saying was, and again, this is where I get cautious, is we were actually able to, because the Russians do the same thing.
Yeah.
But we have been able to break into their Zoom call. And so we know what they see of us. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Because of the Telegram situation, which they were piggybacking on, the Ukrainians actually had an advantage in some ways by being able to access the Russian Zoom calls, and
wow,
piggybacking on their Telegram system.
Yeah,
and so in some way, I haven't spoken to them directly about this, but in some ways, it's kind of a bummer for the Ukrainians that the Kremlin shut off these Telegram channels, because they were able to actually intercept them and know what the Russians knew and didn't know.
Well, that could also be part of the secret reason why they decided to do this, that it was actually doing more harm than good, and that loose lips sink ships, and the guys didn't know how to encrypt stuff, or they pulled a Hegseth. They invited somebody into their talking group that's actually a Ukrainian soldier, using an account from a guy that's actually dead, and the Russians, because they're not coordinating, they could literally take the phone from a dead Russian soldier that they managed to keep open, hack it, stay in all these groups, get access to all these things, answer back as if it's him. They could even, because like you said, they're hijacking some of their imagery, send messages that sound like, oh yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing. So we're on the same side still. They could pretend, they would have everything they would need to pretend to be the real guy. We got to take a break, because this is not the only place the Ukrainians have made major inroads into Russian technology. An extraordinary thing, like it's become part of how they work. It's incredible. So we'll be back right after this. It's the Houseworks Radio program, Mega Worldwide.
Stepping away real quick.
Me too.
Okay. Yeah, this is crazy. The weird thing on like, oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm alone. I'm alone. Shit, I got to go. I'll just sit with the chat room. I don't care. You guys they can just leave me and everybody can go potty at the same time. I'm okay. I don't need you guys. I'm all right. I'm alone again without you. All right, hold on.
And we're coming back.
Phil's back. Waiting on Johnny.
Now let's get back with Hal Sparks' radio program, Mega Worldwide.
For the record, if I may, the Ukrainians have not only bested and broken into both the Telegram channels and the drone Zoom call that the Russians use to coordinate their drone and anti-drone and I don't know, counter drone, I guess would be what it is, attacks. They also broke into the Russians' nuclear system, the system that monitors both the health of their systems and their functionality and where they are. Ukrainian hackers obtained information on the architecture of software tools used in the development and testing of Russia's strategic nuclear forces. The cyber operation was conducted by the Ukrainian militias, cyber experts from the 256th, and volunteers from an international intelligence community called Information Napalm. The operation included gathering preliminary information from human sources, OSINT analysis, and subsequent cyber components. Now, human intelligence, that's human. Open source intelligence, which is OSINT, and Cybint is cyber intelligence, meaning hackers. So you guys know a bunch of cool new words out there in Sparkler land. It's noted that the intelligence community managed to obtain this information as early as 2024. They've been working on it since then. But as of 2025, the operation's operational intelligence capabilities have been exhausted. So as of 2026, some of the information obtained can be made public. In particular, hackers managed to obtain a set of documents regarding research and development under the codename Polis-24 for conducting interim tests of early warning system modules. So they have access to how Russia's early warning systems for anti-ballistic missile and anti-nuclear systems work from, now granted, it might be dusty and left over from the Cold War. It might be a brand new system, but that's what they use, and the Ukrainians were able to bust into it. The document explicitly states that the technical specifications were received from a military unit, 33949, with a number of publications directly linked to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, specifically its clandestine intelligence division, which means probably not talking about it, but they have a backdoor into the FSB and GRU for the last little bit. Anyways, and they've been holding off talking about this, but since this avenue is released, it's more like a wag of the finger and scaring Putin a little bit. In late February 2026, it was known that Ukrainian hackers had breached the accounts of Russian military personnel, which made it possible to determine how the Russians were using the Belarusian infrastructure to launch attacks on Ukraine. During the operation, cyber experts gained access to the monitoring systems used by drone operators. This is what you were talking about. This is how they got into this. Yep. Ukrainian hackers did not control the drones, but they observed the enemy's actions and helped improve the effectiveness of the Ukrainian side's operational countermeasures. Intelligence officers organized round-the-clock covert surveillance of the accounts, during which the data was promptly transmitted to the Ukrainian Defense Forces. This significantly improved the situational awareness of the Ukrainian defenders and enabled them to effectively shoot down and neutralize Russian drones. By the way, the proof that this is not stopped is the fact that the Ukrainians shot down every missile coming in, I think, last night for the first time. They didn't miss a single one. And partly they believe it is that they've gotten a heads up that yes, their countermeasures are great, but part of it is because they know the future. They know, right before the launch happens, either its target and direction or its flight path, or at least partially. So the fact that they know this is incredible. And again, invaluable. Like, think of this during, any James Bond movie you're talking about, like any secret device that they're trying to find that would unscramble a device, or even the Imitation Game. Like the level of intelligence that they're gathering is ridiculous. It's extraordinary.
Well, and the advances that they're making in the Zaporizhia direction, absolutely. I mean, I'm very confident in saying, and I'm not giving anything away, but I'm very confident in saying that if you can hack into your enemy's drone system so that you know what the enemy can see, you can move your troops in a different direction so that they're not
effectively invisible.
Effectively invisible, so that you're not observed.
Yeah.
So if they can hack into an observer drone of the Russians who is looking, north, send your troops south, and maneuver around that way. And, it just shows time and time again that the Ukrainians are better at this.
Yeah.
They're better at this.
Yeah.
Than the Russians are.
For
whatever reason.
I'll tell you a couple reasons. One, they have to be.
I can tell you a couple reasons.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention. And also because...
and if you empower your people.
They're fighting for a real reason. They're fighting for something real. Right. And it's and real or imagined, your freedom or your religious worth is what makes somebody, a powerful force to deal with. And it's why it's been so effective over time. And that's why the Iranians are going to be more difficult to beat than Trump thinks. It doesn't mean they're right. It just means they're more driven for this particular type of, fight if it ever becomes a ground war, because they're fighting for the other side of the reality wall. And that's wholly different than fighting for your right to live free. Because living is a crucial part of this. The Russians are also facing this similar idea, that the Ukrainians are fighting for the future of their country and their people and their existence in a way that the Russians just aren't.
Well, and additionally, the Russian military is structured in such a way that you are part of a machine, whereas the Ukrainian military it empowers its people and allows them to be inventive and to adapt and to, go with the flow sort of thing. So you can be much more adaptive in the Ukrainian army than you can in the Russian army, because if you're in the Russian military and you make a wrong step, there is going to be a 10-ton brick that falls on you from the command and control. They don't empower their people. They don't have an NCO class, a non-commissioned officer class. They don't let their soldiers make decisions independent of a much higher command structure. Ukrainians, and I've seen this because I've been with them. I'm now 5 years into this conflict with Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians allow their people a lot more autonomy and a lot more adaptiveness than the Russians do. And so if a Ukrainian can take advantage of a situation, he will do it.
Right.
And he will have his team do it and coordinate it on the fly. The Russians don't do that. And it's clearly giving the Ukrainian armed forces a huge decisive advantage.
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the things that people talk about in terms of robots, for example, and why we fear them on the battlefield and all this kind of stuff is that once one robot learns a skill, they all know it. And, ironically, that kind of skill sharing has happened before in human warfare forever. It just takes a little longer to get there, right? It's the speed at which it happens, I think, that's shocking, not the fact that it does. That everybody starts putting the same type of leaf in their boot to protect against trench foot in Vietnam because word gets out, right? Those kind of things. And it allows you to fight longer and fight harder and that kind of stuff. And those always happen. The difference is that these days is that it's not surprising that people pick up on these things and try to adapt and protect themselves. It's that battle systems like what the Russians have and what the Chinese have are contrary to that happening at all. It is overruled by the command structure, that it is so hierarchical, and there is such a drop off in, between Russian enlisted and Russian leadership, for example, or Chinese rule over what soldiers do and the uniformity of behavior, that any kind of, a soldier coming, I'm sure there's a bureaucracy and it's a pain in the butt to push things up the chain in any kind of giant military bureaucracy the world over. But it certainly is easier in Ukraine than it is in, say, the United States. And it's certainly easier in the United States than it is in the European, in some of the NATO forces. And it's all easier, if not directly in contradiction to the impossibility of doing it within the Russian system and the Chinese system, especially with the elimination of Telegram. Even if you do have a good idea you can pass around to the guys on the front line as a Russian soldier, that's gone. You don't even have a mechanism by which to do it anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I am hoping that, and we do know that there are Ukrainian advisors who are now in the Gulf, talking to our guys who are dealing with Iranian forces who have learned an awful lot because they've been on the front lines with the Russians developing drone technology. Not just the Shahed. The Shahed is a blunt instrument.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other drone technologies that the Iranians have been privy to because the Russians have had to contend with the inventiveness of the Ukrainians. So, I hope that there are a bunch of Ukrainian guys down there. I know there's some, but I hope there are a whole bunch of them down there in the Gulf right now, talking to our soldiers and our airmen and our Navy guys and sailors, airmen, and Marines about how to combat drone warfare.
For sure.
Yeah. Because the Ukrainians know it better than anybody else. And I've been with these Ukrainian drone operators, again, just not 2 weeks ago. And this is a unit. This is an actual military unit, okay? Yeah. But I've also been speaking to entrepreneurs. I've been speaking to technologists. I've been go to On the Edge after we're done talking.
Yeah.
Go to my channel. Look at how many episodes I have done with drone adjacent people. Okay, whether or not they're the entrepreneurs, whether they're the military, whether or not they're the strategists, I have done I don't know how many different episodes on drone warfare because it's changing the face of war itself. And if the American military is not listening to the Ukrainians, who I've been speaking with for now going on 5 years, we're in trouble. We're in real deep trouble because the Ukrainians that I speak to here, whether it is in development or distribution or strategy or whatever angle, I have repeatedly heard from them say to me, the West is not learning the lessons that we are learning here on the ground in combat with the Russians. The West is not listening to us. We are trying to tell them the lessons we are learning, and they are not listening. So I am really afraid about what is happening in the Gulf because the Iranians have been listening because they've been participants in drone warfare. And if we don't start listening to our Ukrainian friends and the lessons they've learned, we're going to be in a world of hurt. So, not only should we be thankful for the Ukrainians, and by the way, as biased as I am living here in Kiev, I hope we reciprocate by benefiting the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
But certainly for our own airmen, sailors, Marines, soldiers, we better be listening to the Ukrainians, and we better be listening with a very finely tuned ear because they know. And the Iranians know. And if we don't listen to the Ukrainians who've been fighting Iranian and Russian drone warfare for the last 5 years, or going on 5 years, then we're being really reckless.
Yeah,
So
we gotta take a break. When we come back, I want to go into one of the bottlenecks, and I know we have some questions, and we've been blazing past them. And Johnny, you have to be more bullish and just jump straight in. You're a valuable member. You can
You
go
guys
ahead.
are rocking. You guys are
I
talking
know.
about
I
good
went on a
stuff.
rant. I went on a rant. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm messing
I like
around with
this
everyone.
rant.
Yeah. We'll be back right after
It was
this.
a worthy rant, though.
Because I want to, the issue is hey, it's all ball bearings nowadays. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
It's true, though.
River. I know.
River.
Yeah.
It is true. If we don't listen to the Ukrainians, we're off the air, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to get our asses handed to us. We're going to get shit right up the backside.
Yeah.
Because the Iranians know what they're doing with drones. We don't.
Right. Well, that's the, thanks, Isel, yeah. Hey, it's all ball bearings nowadays. I need some 3-in-1 oil and some gauze pads. I need about 12 quarts of antifreeze. Probably Presto. You know what? Make that quicker, Steve.
I'm glad I'm not in news anymore. Otherwise, I would be in the Gulf right now, and I don't want it.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. That's going to be bad. Unless we stop it, it's going to be really bad.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the problem is, again, Trump's picking targets, because he wants to be hands-on and a bunch of these things and look useful, and he doesn't understand it, so he's afraid it'll get out ahead of him. So his own ego is making him. I mean, that's why they attacked Karg Island, and ultimately, I feel like they're going to try and seize it with ground troops. That's where the Marines are going.
Okay.
I'm still concerned about the 82nd. I've been talking to Malcolm.
They flew a bunch of guys out, right? We've got Marines positioning. There's some upside to this in terms of just, again.
I am happy, you are happy. Let us be happy together, whether the weather is cloudy or sunny. I will always be your funny honey bunny. I am lucky, you are lucky. Let us get lucky together, whether the weather is cloudy or breezy. I'll be there to say, hey, come on, let's take it easy. 'Cause isn't it nice to have the friends that you do? And isn't it nice that the sky is so blue? And isn't it nice to say I love you, chugga chugga choo choo, woo woo. I am smiling, you are smiling. Let us smile together, whether the weather is cloudy or stormy. I will still be there in the morning. I'll be right by your side in the morning. I'll make you breakfast in the morning. I hope that you like cereal.
I know that people talk about the fact that there's so little happy news in this. We try to find a way to kind of, I'm not interested in putting a positive spin on stuff, but I am interested in looking at some of the upsides, which often bring reality to bear on those who do not believe it applies to them. And in Donald Trump's case, he lives that way. And before we take questions in the last little segment, I'm sure we're going to have to do a speed round at this rate. I would like to point out that while drone manufacturing, for example, of the Shahed-style drones, in about 2023, 2024, Russia moved most of its drone production out of Iran, so that Iran built a factory or two there. So like 90% of the drones they were getting from inside Russia itself. And again, Ukraine hit several of those things, limiting that supply, but they're outputting about 1,000 of them a day was the theory, at their height. Okay. And we often talk about the Shahed drone as being a piece of crap, but partly because it runs on a 2-stroke engine. It's cheap, it's easy to deploy, but it runs on, these little engines are not small. They're not a minor manufacturing dawdle. They don't just it's not a rubber band on a string that that you wind up with your finger. Like it's a relatively complicated thing, and you can't ramp up the creation to the engines that they use. And those engines, by and large, are based on a German 2-stroke engine. I've been doing my homework.
I know.
Yeah. I'm going to forget the name of it, though. It's like the Linman, something like that. But they are using these Limbach. That's what it was. I should remember that. Barbara Bach, Bachman, Turner, Overdrive, Bach in general. The Limbach 2-stroke engine, these little things they put in scooters and that kind of stuff. And there's a company in China called Xiamen Limbach that just knocks these things off. That's its whole gig. They don't even pretend that that's not what they're doing. It's literally called Xiamen Limbach. Like, we just steal this engine and copy it. We make copies of it. But their production capability is within the realm of human capacity. They can make a lot of them, but a lot isn't that big a number anymore, especially as these countries burn through them with kamikaze drones. And then NATO, one of the ways NATO, when Trump was like bragging about he made everybody spend more money in NATO on stuff. Well, one of the big things they're spending it on is those kind of engines, both for development of and deployment of their own version of drones. They want these similar kind of cheap drones or whatever. Well, those, it doesn't matter if Russia can crank out 1,000 drones a day if they can only have access to 150, Limbach motors from China, because everybody else is buying them out. NATO, interestingly enough, has been in the front of the line buying up all these things to basically undermine Russia's ability to buy and deploy these things. Now, Ukraine's having a hard time finding them, but NATO's supplying them. One of the reasons NATO is buying them is to hand them off to the Ukrainians to use, basically circumventing Russia's supplier in this situation.
Yeah. And just quickly, because we're running short on time, is that one of the major problems that NATO military forces have, and particularly the U.S., is that we have been building anti-aircraft systems that are meant to take out like Scud missiles, right?
Big stuff.
Your kind of medium, big stuff, right?
Yeah.
So we have Patriots, ATACMS, all that kind of stuff that is meant to hit a large or a medium scale missile.
Yeah.
What we have learned in Ukraine, what we've learned in Ukraine, and we better learn real quick in the United States, is that you don't need those kind of weapons when you are facing a swarm of drones. You need projectiles. You need the M2, a kind of Bradley, the machine guns. We have a variety of different kind of anti-aircraft systems but what you need to do is step up the production of them and the deployment of them. Mm-hmm. Things that just shoot lots of lead into the air, lots of lead. We don't do that. What we have is things that are big. They hit other big things with proximity so that they destroy the incoming medium range missiles. What has changed in drone warfare is the fact that you've got a swarm of drones coming at you. Mm-hmm. They are small, but each one carries an RPG or whatever warhead. A grenade, whatever it is, 60 millimeter mortar. You need something that throws a lot of lead into the air and just decimates a swarm.
Or a cutting laser.
That's not our posture. Or a cutting laser, the British BAE, I think, just recently said that they're almost to production level with a laser system, because that's cost effective.
Yep.
You can fire a laser at a drone and at the speed of light and knock it out for the cost of an electrical charge. Mm-hmm. They produce a $1,000 drone, but they make 200 of them, and they send them all at you. And if you can do a laser, that's even better.
It's missile
than throwing a bunch of lead.
Agree. Yeah. And that's and the U.S. and Israel have been working on a similar system, and it is been test deployed already on American warships. We know we have
Let's go. Let's go. Quick.
I would also like to point out that while these drones are not all drones are created equal. While I was looking it up, the Chinese engine, for example, the Russians make their own version of that engine. They have a factory because they can't always rely on the supply, and they want to make sure they're making their own engines. For that's the copy of that Limbach. The Chinese one and the ones that Iran makes in house they can stay in the air for about 20 hours, so they can run for about 20 hours. They can cycle and come back and run. They have about 20 hours of life in them. The Russian ones have 4 to 5 hours of life in them. If they don't work on the first strike, they never work again. And they can't even test them much in the length of distance that they're sending them, because they're traveling almost that far. So from where they're sending them from inside Russia out into Ukraine, for example. So they're cranking out crap. We got 5 minutes left. Let's do a speed round of the questions. I'm sure there are some, Johnny Million. We've just had so much to talk about.
Right,
We missed you on
round.
Wednesday, so yeah.
From Nick Rich, are fuel supplies for civilians still available?
Yes. We're fine. We're fine.
That's an answer. From John G, does Ukraine have the ability to hit Moscow and they don't do it?
Yes, they do it, but they don't do it to the extent that it is provocational. But yes, they can hit Moscow.
Okay.
It's a fine line because you don't want to hit too much in Moscow because the Russians will go crazy. So they hit stuff, but they're very selective in what they do. Next.
Why S.D. Sullivan asks, why doesn't Ukraine blow up the bridge to Crimea?
They're going to. They will.
They hit a couple of
they picked their moment.
They hit some repair ferries and some supply ferries just recently, almost as a setup.
Pretty derogatory.
They hit Crimea.
Yeah.
They're going to pick a time.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of prerequisites.
They're going to pick a time. Yeah, and then they're going to do it. They have the capability to do it. They just got to pick their moment.
Okay, sorry, Johnny, go ahead. Yeah,
a few more minutes.
Asked, Phil, what is your opinion about the U.S. walking away from the quote peace deal? Not that it was much.
Oh, there was never a peace deal, and the Americans, unfortunately, are more in tune with Putin than they are with Zelensky.
Yeah,
so
good.
Putin doesn't want peace, and so neither does America. Ukraine, however, and Europe might have something else to say about that.
Damon Dog asks, what does Phil think Zelensky is asking in return for helping Middle East countries with drones?
Bradley's.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
And
Bradley's and anti-aircraft systems like the Patriot, because we do get hit with big stuff. We can handle the Shaheeds. We need stuff to take out their S-300s and S-400s. And these are Scud level things, and that takes a Patriot. So I want to see Bradleys, and I want to see Patriot missile systems.
Yeah. Is that it, Johnny? We got
Alan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Alan B asks, would you ask Phil, can Russia get kicked off the UN Security Council?
Not
no,
while Trump's
but
president.
They should be.
Right. Not while Trump's president.
They should be, but they're not going to.
Right.
One last one. We can get through them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go.
And Brayman asks, can you ask Philip if Ukraine is removing more ORCs than can be replaced the last couple of months?
Say again. Are they replacing more
Removing
ORCs?
more ORCs than can be replaced the last couple of months. Orcs.
Yeah.
Orcs. Yes, they are. They're killing more Russians than can be recruited. They're going to, if Russia is going to continue to prosecute this war, they're going to have a massive a conscription effort. That is a possibility, but it will be very unpalatable, especially because they're going to have to start pulling from Western Russia.
Yeah. And we're at the end of the show. Don't forget, On the Edge, Philip's show. And then, of course, it's Johnny Million on Twitch and Facebook now and YouTube. But check out the show. Subscribe to those and subscribe to this channel as well. Yeah. Boston Brian says that Siersky or somebody else has said that the bridge is basically as good as gone. So they're definitely teeing up for that. So thanks, Boston Brian. He's also awesome. Watch his show as well. And we'll talk to you guys next week. That's Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Thank you guys so much.
Ooh.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. That was a really good speed round, Phil.
Yeah, it was. That's a lot. Yeah, got crowbarred in. Yeah. Bunch of stuff. Yeah, so I love the fact that
I'm hyperventilating.
Yes, right. I have to say, I was like, when I was looking up the stuff about the drone warfare or whatever, I hadn't been aware that they had moved most of, if not all, of their drone, their copy of the Shahed to using Iranians, moved 90% of it. I knew they'd done some, but not that much. So that means the impact on those factories that Ukraine is hitting is way more because they aren't getting they aren't getting
the Iranians.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
For the both for the Russians and the Iranians, because the Iranians have now gotten to a point where I'm still got the adrenaline going from the speed round. The Iranians have actually capitalized on the industrialization. Thank you, Chicago. They've taken advantage of Russian industrialization and actually they gave them the technology, they gave them the means to create drones, but some of those drones could head back to Iran in this current conflict. So, I mean, this whole thing is we're off the air. So it's a big fuck. It's a big fuck.
Yeah, it is.
Both sides.
Yeah,
both sides.
Yeah.
The only ones who are really benefiting, I think, are the Saudis. People have been saying the Russians are benefiting.
The Saudis and
people
the UAE.
Have been saying that the
holy shit.
Yeah, people have been saying the Russians have been having advantage. I don't think that's true.
Right.
I actually think they're fucked. I think this conflict screws with them.
Yeah.
Really badly because they needed Iranian support, and now Iran is going to be far more preoccupied with
self-preservation mode.
Neighborhood.
Right. Yep.
Right. Exactly. So I don't think the Russians do find advantage in this conflict, but the Saudis, the Qataris.
Oh my God!
Ultimately,
they're trying to turn that place into like I said, the Cayman Islands meets Las Vegas. That's what they're developing. That's what Project 2030 is, and all that stuff.
And destroy the Shia.
But there's a glass ceiling. Yeah, there's a glass ceiling on the top of that. As long as Iran can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and there's this constant threat of a terror regime with proxies that nobody wants to invest. Like they're doing these limited things where they'll send. You'll have an office floor in Dubai or some shit like that. But nobody's going all in in any of these circumstances because that hangs over them all the time. And so one of the reasons they benefit is if you just rip this Band-Aid off, it'll be ugly for a short term, but by their plan 2030 to 2040, in 5 years' time, if Iran's if they go back to a Shah-like system and they're acting like Jordan, the money that floods into the Middle East is absurd compared to the amount of money that they've already had.
Well, and the Shia movement is not destroyed with the collapse of Iran, but it is just massively damaged. Sunni Shia, Sunni Muslim, the Ummah, is far more powerful and significant if Tehran is kneecapped.
Yeah.
So
exactly
this whole thing, and it's not good for us either. It's not good for us. It's not good for anybody. It's good for Riyadh, and it's good for the Gulf area.
Well, they get it. They get their main rival eliminated, and the target isn't even on their back. Like we carry the target. The Iranian reaction from true believers and assholes like that guy who shot up the place in Austin, or sleeper cells or any of this stuff, or even in Israel, that like Israel and the United States get to walk around with a fucking bullseye on them for the next 2 decades, and the people who really benefited from it and arguably bankrolled it or pushed Trump into it are free and fucking clear and more than happy to sit back and watch us take the heat. And Trump's too stupid to realize that that's where the play came from. That's the danger part. So Johnny's just walking out. He's done. He's dropping his arms over it.
He's at it. He's at it.
Do you have a live stream after this, Johnny? Yeah.
No, but I wanted to show you that Foster coming up behind the green screen. Fell asleep.
Because
is he a Russian blue?
No, this guy's like regular stripy guy. His brother is very Russian blue, though.
We have a Russian blue. Like, obviously, we're being surrounded. Murphy.
Yes, yeah, we're being surrounded by Russians. But I took that down because that was my happy ending. But I much prefer that we got to do the
speed round. I think we'll have to do that earlier, so it's not that much pressure on Phil. All right, I'll let you guys go, and we're going to send the show over to Trucker John and everybody else. Much love to both of you.
Trucker John.
Yep, and
hopefully our studio will be we flew past it quickly, but because of the electrical kind of major fluctuations in Kiev in the last month and a half, whether it was a surge when power came back on or whether it was a sudden dropout of electricity, one way or the other, wiring is fucked.
Yeah, no doubt.
Our wiring is so fucked. So I've got guys coming in and fixing the wiring in the studio, but also the apparatus, like our sign.
It's reflecting, so it's hard to see.
I can't see it.
Yeah, it is.
But we'll be back. We'll be back on the air in short order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to work. Oh well.
It's
horrible. Trust me.
Yeah.
We're gonna
have to start a new GoFundMe called "Surge Protectors for Ukraine."
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Love you guys.
Sweetwater.
That's right.
Guys.
All right. See you later, guys.
Talk to you on Wednesday.
All right. Take care. And chat room, thank you guys for being with us for the show. I greatly appreciate you. And thank you for the support and everything. We need to get back to our running list of the super chats that I can see. I get so busy doing the show, and I appreciate you guys' patience with that. I'd love to, single out folks beyond the credits at the end, but it's a lot to manage. Just the running of the show at the same time I'm actually contributing. At least I think I am. To the content of the show. Thank you very much. Hit that like, share the show. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to go hug her. She brought me a coffee when she came back from the gym, and so that means she wants me to help clean. I was going to anyways. I have a bunch, today's laundry and listen to madness day. My Saturdays have boiled down into doing all my puttery honeydew list stuff mixed with the absorbing the insanity of our of our current unpleasantness. There was so many things I wish I'd had a chance to get to, and I might have to do a secondary show at some point or start doing a little sub. You know what I need to do? This is what I need. I need to, instead of live streaming everything, I need to do these as some short videos and go, hey, check a look at this and post them because I know it will help the channel and I'm being stupid about it. But I spend most of my time educating myself and paying attention to the details so that I can provide you with real shit here. And so the idea of going I'll stop what I'm doing and, post something secondarily to that is a bit rough. So, and I know the appetite for long form is narrow compared to other videos and that kind of stuff, but I'll find some way to start, posting some short form stuff because we got to get our numbers up for the, so that I'm, in the running to compete with some of the other louder voices because I think I'm adding something to the conversation that nobody else is. I mean, who else has brought up the limitations of production of two-stroke engines and the Limbach engine and the time to failure between the ones that are built in Iran and China and elsewhere and in Germany versus the Russian one? Who else brought that up? Who? I ask you? Who does that kind of homework for you? Good Lord. Anyways, you guys are wonderful. I will talk to you later. Take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. We still have to catch up on all this Epstein stuff. Huge breaking stuff.
Yeah. We ain't saying nothing.
I'll get there.
Black bar from my past, can't track this. Screenshots cropped out, can't catch this. If it looks too wild on the axis, highlight, right click, boom, redact this. Redact this. Blood and face, can't fact check the madness. Throwing out page from the bad habits atlas. If the story get messy in the ad-libs, highlight, right-click, boom, redact this. I was young, I was dumb, I was scrolling. Type way too much, hit send, heart swollen. Now I keep receipts like a lawyer with a folder. But anything risky, get hit with the toner. Whole group chat, got tails, I ain't claim. If my name pop up, that's a typo, blame. Who's that in the pic, man, that ain't go strange. That's a random stranger with a very close face. On the stand of my friends, I plead don't recall. If they ask for the tape, it's a missing file. If they pull up the clip, that's deep fake style. If they show me the proof, I just smile like redact this. Black ball from my past, can't track this. Screenshots cropped out, can't catch this. If it looks too wild on the axis, highlight, right click, boom, redact this. Redact this. Blur that face, can't fact check the madness. Torn out page from the bad habits atlas. If the story get messy in the ad-libs, highlight, right click, boom, yeah. If it hit too close, that's a rumor I heard. If the dateline match, that's a clerical error. If the outfit match, that's a popular shirt. If the tattoo match, that's a stock photo search. I'm allergic to question, coughing the light. I just edit the ending, soften the bite. Take the worst 3 parts of the night, then slice like fun was had and we were not. Every X got a chapter I seal. Every text got a gap in the reel. I ain't lying, I'm curating the reveal. Just trimming little bits of the raw, real deal. If you saw, you didn't. If you know, you didn't. If you talk, I'm clipping. If they ask, we glitching. Swipe that name out, crop that frame out. If it made me look foul, delete then fade out. Redact this. Black ball from my past, can't track this. Screenshots cropped out, can't catch this. If it looks too wild on the axis, highlight, right click, boom, redact this. Redact this. Blur that face, can't fact check the madness. Torn out page from the bad habits atlas. If the story get messy in the air,